Let's delve into the world of mobile payments, and we've talked a lot about this over the last 3 days or so, but let's get some more views from across the community, and joining us to do that are Laurent Desmangles. Gosh, I hope I did that right. Partner and MD at BCG. Also with us, Dan Schatt, GM Financial Innovations at PayPal. Kelly Bayer-Rosmarin, Executive General Manager, Corporate Banking Solutions at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. And Emmanuel Daniel, he is the President and CEO of the Asian Banker. Thanks very much to all of you for joining us. Now, we've been talking about mobile payments for quite some time, and last year we talked about this on Cybers TV. This year, where are we now in this game?
We've talked about it, as you said, for a very long time, but I think 2012 is the year where banks certainly started to jump in with both feet. I think around the world we're seeing a lot of activity.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing an explosion of growth in mobile. This year alone, with PayPal, we'll see over $10 billion in mobile commerce, literally coming from zero a few years ago. In addition, we're seeing significant growth in remote payments overall, people doing global money transfers from the mobile phone, corporate treasurers basically paying suppliers, paying other people through mobile banking applications. Pretty significant. We're also seeing a big shift in the landscape, and people using their mobile phones while they're at the physical point of sale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we think the mobile revolution is here. We 2 months ago hit the point where more than 50% of the access to banking and our transaction websites comes from a mobile device. Mm-hmm. So our customers are already doing it, and we're seeing lots of different models around the world being experimented with. NFC, cloud-based, UnionPay has some interesting applications, so we definitely think that there's a proliferation.
What's your bank experimenting with?
We actually released the first commercially available NFC-enabled phone to do a tap-and-go payment, and the customers who use it love it. They use it extremely frequently. We've got our own little Twitter fan club around it, and we've also done a lot of experimentation on peer-to-peer payments and being able to pay a Facebook friend, for example.
I think the end game in mobile payments is to treat payment as a digitized commodity. But where we are at the moment is that we are in a kind of a transition phase. The back end is still very much ancient card-based technology, for most of the mobile payment players. And there's so much going on that, a bank that doesn't get it right risks being fragmented and, doing small things but not adding up and showing up on the core business that they have.
I was looking at the Daily News at Cybers earlier today with Heather McKenzie, its editor, and she ran a story talking about the fact that banks and telcos are now going to get into bed more with each other. What do you think about that?
Certainly, telcos are looking at it. Sometimes I think, expecting to see lots of revenue in payments. I think banks, being more sophisticated in the payments area, are really looking after other revenue pools that are not really payments related. So it's a little bit of a game of people kind of passing each other in the night without really looking at the same target.
Yeah, I think it's really tricky these days particularly for telcos, because you've got so many pretty cumbersome regulatory hurdles to get through. We're seeing the effects already of Dodd-Frank in the U.S. and what it means for banks in terms of global money transfer. And if you're a telco, it's extremely hard to be able to meet these regulations. And I think increasingly we're big believers in the cloud, that ultimately what you're doing with the mobile phone is you're accessing the internet at the end of the day. And people want direct access to the internet. So you won't even necessarily need your mobile phone to transact. You may not need anything at all, just credentials that you remember in your head that allow you to basically go and authenticate and utilize services.
I think our perspective is that we'll partner with anybody who adds value in the value chain. And in different markets, it may be different as to whether the telco has a direct role or, as Dan just suggested, plays the role of providing access to data services and the telecommunications infrastructure.
Now, it's so interesting to see this debate between the banks and the telcos and the technology companies. The banks and the telcos sort of mirror each other because they both have customer base, both have the capacity to develop deposit base. And in many countries, they're not working very well with each other. At the same time, the technology players like PayPal, can come in and sort of emulate both of them and take it forward. I think the best practice standards are being dictated to the industry by players like the remittance guys. They do quick money transfers around the globe at the lowest possible price. So that's what we're trying to emulate, regardless of what we are.
Sure, I want to come back to you as a PayPal, which is always seen as a non-bank provider, and there are lots of people who always say, these are the guys that are always going to come and eat the bank's lunch. So what do you think? Do you think you can maintain that position, or banks? How long does it take for a bank to catch up with you guys and really give you a run for your money?
Well, at the end of the day, we are two things. We are a global payments network that basically is, in a sense, an internet layer that sits above clearing and settlement systems around the world that allows money movement. And we're also a digital wallet. But we actually are a bank in some regions of the world. We are a bank in a Luxembourg-based bank, but we're not a bank for the traditional reasons that a deposit-gathering financial institution would be in the business for. We're not in it for net interest margin. We're not in it for gathering deposits. We're in it for driving payments between buyers and sellers. We are, at the end of the day, a commerce enabler. And as a commerce enabler, we need to basically allow for frictionless movement of money around the world. So what we've been doing is we've been basically taking the assets that we've built over the years and exposing it in the form of an open platform that financial institutions can link into for their applications, for their customers, so they can compete against the likes of Western Union very well and brand the services themselves.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, so I agree that it's hard to think of PayPal as a non-bank. They do have a banking license in some jurisdictions. And my suspicion is if you fast forward a few years, they'll have more and more of those as they try and get more ingrained in the industry, as well as they are opening up their services to banks. So I think, as with all of payments, it's a networked service globally. There'll be room for both competition and cooperation.
Laurent and Emmanuel, looking as an outside-in perspective, where do you think the capex is going to be in this area, most specifically over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think first on the earlier question, I think this is banks. This is banks' game to win. You were asking about who's going to win out. At the end of the day, when I said earlier, consumers still have to be convinced. Banks have consumer relationships and they have consumer information. This is not going to be a capex-heavy development for banks if they play their cards right. It's not about developing a lot of infrastructure. It's really about developing a suite of services that consumers will relate to, and that really requires deep customer knowledge, which banks have if they can deploy.
And communication, I think that's
Absolutely.
the missing piece, I think, in a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today. I mean, I think all these companies are coming out with all these things because they're trying to beat the other person to it, but there is a catch-up that's needed with communications that needs to be an investment there that takes a longer time to get a consumer, people like me, to do something, to break a habit, because it takes us a really long time. We don't want to do things that we're not used to.
Yeah, it's got to be drop dead easy and simple for the customer, and there's got to be a clear proposition for the retailer. If we're talking about literally moving from a environment where you take out a physical wallet and you take out cards today to not having anything. That said, I think what we see is that we're moving in a direction very quickly where ultimately financial institutions are really looking inwards to determine what is their core business. Because if you want to develop a digital wallet that ultimately is very compelling for the consumer and the retailer, you've got to be in a bunch of businesses that have nothing at all to do with banking and payments. You've got to get into geolocation. You've got to get engagement technologies. So that's where we can come in and help support.
In fact, that exactly that point. Another way to think about capex is to think about the difference in the terminology, mobile wallet and digital wallet. I think we should all be thinking digital wallet. To think mobile wallet is to be caught in a transition sort of a technology, and that's not where we should be.
I don't think all the banks are playing catch-up. We certainly are taking a lead in our market. Our mobile application, Kaching, is very well loved. It's got a great interface. It wasn't a huge CapEx investment. Where I do think there is going to be investment is on the merchant side. So in payments, both sides are critical. You need to capture the hearts and minds of the consumers, but you also need to enable the ubiquity of acceptance on the merchant side.
Yeah.
And whether it is NFC or cloud-based technology, there's work to do to really upgrade the whole experience at the point of sale. And that's why we've led on that front as well with introducing Pi to the market.
In fact, I was very impressed with the way Commonwealth Bank saw the equation, because one half of the equation is the customer, the consumer. The other half of the equation is the merchant, the acceptance, the acceptance network. You got to get both sides right, to play this game.
You want to come back on that?
No, I could not agree more. But to Kelly's point, that's where there will be some investment. But again, we're not talking about major investments in terms of CapEx relative to other waves of terminalization in payments history. There are alternatives to NFC that you guys, as TB, are also investing in, and we're looking at numbers that are relatively small in the grand scheme of
Yes,
things.
relative to core banking replacements, it's
For
tiny.
example, yes.
I've got one more question, which is what happens when you lose your mobile phone? If you've got all these payments that like I do every 5 minutes, what happens there?
It's actually not a problem. There are ways to credential the phone to the individual and passwords. We actually give our customers options of what they expose above and behind the PIN, and we can cut it off instantly and reissue it on your replacement phone. So security is not actually the challenge it might appear at first blush.
We're big believers in ultimately the cloud. So when you're doing a transaction with your digital wallet through PayPal, where you're ultimately linking your various banking instruments and you're engaged as a bank customer through the PayPal wallet. There's nothing that is basically there on the phone for someone to steal, because you're basically utilizing your credentials.
But some regulators are putting too much restriction on accessing the cloud that we risk making it harder than easier, going forward. And a few countries are that way today.
Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, when you're looking at cloud-based technologies vis-a-vis NFC or something that is ultimately inherent in the phone, it's ultimately a much better proposition for all parties, because you don't have as many concerns around some of the issues that you've just raised about.
Okay.
fraud
Well, thanks
protection.
very much to all of you for joining us.